joining me again today for another oil painting session. Actually, today's lessons is going to be a mixed media. I've already put some acrylics on the canvas so that they would dry and that I could go and work right over them. The purpose of this is the mood that I want to capture today is a fall scene. Lots of warm colors. I've used yellow ochre, orange, and some burnt umber, and I just smeared it onto an old dry canvas. In fact, this was an old canvas that was done in acrylic, and I just kind of painted over it. I allowed the acrylics to dry, so there is no paint for me to work into, and then I'm going to be working in my oils on top of this. Part of the reason for this is so I can capture a lot of color interest and capture the mood of the fall colors. I have lots of color reference pictures over here on my right, and those pictures happen to reflect a lot of different fall colors. Some of them introduce greens and all, but to capture an overall impact of the oranges and the yellows and to do it easily and to do it in the time frame of the show, I felt that it would be very advisable to cover with acrylic. So you just take a large brush, preferably like a 1-inch brush, use your acrylics with water base, and just smear in and mix colors, starting a little light where you're going to have a light area and then build outwards. Then allow this to dry. Then as I go to my oil paints, which I have down on the palette, I have a rainbow of fall colors. I absolutely love the fall time of the year, so I've taken from yellow to ochres to oranges to reds and to browns. And I have a little blue on the end, and I've kind of mixed them together into a rainbow of colors. And I'm using a large 2-inch natural bristle brush, and I did allow the acrylics to dry. So this is mixed media, and this is a dry canvas at this stage. This will allow it to make it easier for me to cover with my oils. So I'm going to now use my oil paints on a large brush and go down to some of the warmer tint and put a very thin application on the canvas similar to what I had before. This will give me a little bit of moisture that when I go in and do my other techniques it will mix slightly. So I'll start with a little of the warm tone, maybe a little in the water, and that means I have very little paint on the canvas. I'm going to go down and start working in a little bit of the orange into the ochre, and again just kind of re-tinting lightly over what's already there, and that makes my acrylics work for me and show through. After I get a little of this tinting and accent covered on the canvas, we're going to go ahead and go to kind of a sienna, which is a brown, and I'm just tapping it on a dry brush, and I'm going to lightly soften and shadow in. You'll see as I add colors, I just kind of tickle and blur. I'm not looking for any details of leaves. This is a handy way to use an old canvas that maybe you didn't have a successful painting on it, but it being an acrylic, you have to have an acrylic foundation, and then I put the acrylics on top of it. So I'm mixing and blending and trying to get just enough of a thin application of oil paint so that when I add my more color, it will soften. I'm going to some burnt umber now, tapping it on the same brush without cleaning it. And I'm going to make a little more of the shadow areas. I think I'll go up in towards the top and just kind of blur some shadows. I want the advantage of the acrylics underneath to still peek through in spots, and I'm going to some areas of dark, especially right down here across in the base, back behind where I'm going to have a little ridge. So we're just kind of tapping, gently tickling, doing similar to what I did in the acrylics, but not concerning ourselves with detail. So that can be done fairly simply, and then I'm going to switch to a smaller brush, and this is a fan brush and a bristle brush, and I'm going to go down to the palette, and I'm going to establish a little bit more of the darks in positioning. I want to locate where I'm going to have the edge of a stream or a road or a little area of shadow, so I'm kind of tickling right down along the edge of, well, right now we'll just call it a road, although I will probably put highlights on it like water. And I'm getting little shadow movements and little patches of other shadows back into the back. And I'm keeping my brush light and airy so that I can have some dark areas and some of the areas that I'm going to be putting background interest. And in the land area, I keep my brush flowing with the lay of the land. And then in the tree area, I want to keep it just kind of light and airy, almost as if I were doing clouds. So again, I'm looking for a little thin, weak application of oil paints introduced on top of the dried acrylics. So being a mixed media painting, you'll find that there's, when you do this, there's very little paint actually on the canvas. Let's shadow along the river's edge, and again, this is very weak. I am not applying much paint. And I soften it and blur it and almost smear it a little bit. When I get along the edge of the riverbank and tickle with a big brush, not a sharp edge brush, you can see it apply little extra dark pockets of shadow area. For reflection, for water reflection, I have to pull down vertically. Maybe we'll bring a little shadow across the stream in a few spots. Now once I get the dark color on, I'm going to start thinking about the light spots. Usually, if you're painting just wet on wet in oils, you'd want to paint the sky in first and then develop over it. But since we've got dried acrylics on there, we're going to take the white oil paint. This is a base white, kind of a soft white, with a little bit of blue, and I'm going to go in and kind of poke holes into the sky, and we'll go up to an area that is going to up in the sky area. And I need just a little bit of light tickling of open sky. In a lot of my reference pictures you can see this. And right now this puts the sky on top of the trees, which is not a proper illusion. We will later bring the tree illusion back over it. You're going to be picking up a little bit of the colors as they mix. I'm going to go back down, get a little bit more. And this is just a little bluish white, a little grayed. I actually like it to pick up the orange so it grays a little bit. If there's water reflections, you might want to just kind of sweep reflectively, which means vertically, in the water in a few spots. If we decide that's not going to be a road, which I've already decided that's not going to be a road. And we're not going to do too much where the stream will tickle through there, but just right in there, there's a little movement of water kind of floating back into the distance. Now, I want this to kind of bump into the edges so I have soft edges. What we wanted to work about at this time is a little bit of the detail further in the back. I want to get just a little bit more light, kind of an opening in the forest of this color. And way back down, I'm going to punch a couple of little holes of, not really sky, but distance. I think there's a picture, there's a picture over on my right that I want to, if you could go into this one, and have an idea of how at the end of a road here, there's a lot of the distance of a low horizon. And back here, far away, there's a little house, and you could put a lot more detail in it, but there's little openings throughout the trees. And those openings throughout the trees are what I'm trying to achieve right now. But there's a pocket down at the end of the road, and so I'm going to come back up to my canvas and make a pocket of atmosphere or distance for a low horizon right down here in the forest. So this is basically the effect that I'm trying to get, and maybe a little bit of that over on the left. Now if it turns too orange, when it mixes in with the wet oil paints, it doesn't mix with the acrylics, we'll come over to the left and we'll put a little bit right over in this section. So it really is not too blue a blue, it's more of a rusty color, and if you want to enhance it, you just wipe your brush, get a little bit more fresh paint, and restate it. That's the easy way to do it. And that's looking pretty good. So we'll come back up in here and we'll just restate a little bit more of the blue there and there. These are just little openings for interest in the background. A little bit more right up in there. Now our next effect is to go in and do some trunks in the distance. The best way to do those, well, there's a number of ways to do it. So let's use a liner, which I think is the best to keep them small. We're going to wet it in thinner, and we'll get just a little bit of brown, but we'll use a little bit of that sky color in it so it stays kind of distant to begin with, and we'll indicate a few far away toothpick-sized trees. Now I'm going to come back at the end of the stream, and right down here, just kind of touch in the dark area, which is a similar coloring back there, and lightly pull up little branches and sticks that kind of will be in front of that sky area. You don't want to get them too large in the distance, and I keep these very loose so I get a far away look with maybe leaves in front of them. So I'm just kind of pulling on the paint. Because it's mixing with the wet oils, you'll find that it won't stay too distinctive and almost fades out into the distance. And that's what I'm hoping to achieve. If any of them get too hard or distinctive, you can either rub them with the handle of the brush or just kind of pull on them, wipe the brush, and almost go back over them and lift off the paint. Okay, we'll get a little darker as we come forward, and I'd like to establish some of the darker trunks. So we strengthen the color by adding a little more burnt umber and Van Dyke, and I use thinner in this. I don't use medium because it'll flow quite easily with thinner, and then it'll set up better. Let's come over and decide where we're going to have a couple of very distinctive trees. Over to the left, there's an old one on here, but you can barely see him, so we'll use him a little bit as a guide, although he could just stay there and not be used and just stay way far away in the forest. I'm going to pull that down and slide the brush up, and I'm just kind of floating the brush, and you'll see the paint flows off fairly easily. I need a reload of paint, and we'll make this in kind of a V structure, just a little bit up there. And I just kind of drag the brush, and I keep pulling on the wet paint. While it's very wet, I just catch the brush and lift away and out, kind of staggering as I go up the tree. And that's going to be a nice interest there. To go in front of this open sky area, it will work very well to take the liner, maybe put a straighter trunk, but we got to come down here to the land area, which is somewhere down here in the shadowy area, and bring a smaller tree on up and just float and pull and make a nice silhouetted trunk against that distant sky. Allow your colors to mix. It's a lot more interesting. After we get some of these trunks on and based in, we'll have a lot of fun with two other techniques for the foliage. Since we have a base tint in the background for all these different colors, we don't have to worry too much about specific leaves. They'll come out with one of the fun loose techniques. This is what's so much fun about this fall scene. We captured the mood of coloring here, and let's go over here to the right and find one a little lower. I think I'll plant him a little lower here. Drag all the way up, almost off the canvas. And again, just pulling and defining, and we can fatten up the tree trunks just by going over them a couple of times. And again, I don't want to spend too much time on the detail, but it is a fun effect. We'll even have one hanging down from over and above, because we're going to put foliage on that with 2 or 3 different techniques. And I'm just going to clean my brush out with some more suggestions of distant trunks. The reason I don't have to make sure these trunks stay specifically detailed is because there could be foliage in front of them from other trees. So you don't want to overstate them. And if they get too strong, because the acrylic is dry underneath, you could actually just rub them out a little bit and keep them kind of soft and in the distance. One little trick I like to do when I've got want to plant a tree, and I think I know about where he's going to be in, is I'll just shadow a little bit down on the ground and kind of smudge it in with my finger. And that gives me a nice kind of shadowed effect and a place for the tree to kind of rest. And that would be the shadows of the foliage on the ground. Okay, so we've got a pretty good rough in at this stage, and having the acrylic do a lot of the work. Let's go in and put a little bit more interest in a few of the trunks and make sure we've got a basic placement. Of course, I could put in lots of trees, but I'm keeping it fairly simple for this one. That's a main one. We'll bring one down for layering of perspective. Not quite as large, a little thinner, and placed a little bit further back on the canvas for another plateau or area. So we just kind of layer them like you would look down a football field, and that's on, the 10-yard line on the other side of the field, where this one could be about midway. Most of the guys can relate to the football. Okay, so that's kind of a rough in there. For the water illusion, I want to keep that thought in my mind of the water, but I want to bring some of these colors back up over the blue. I need a little thinner and a clean fan brush with some of the colors of the fall, and I just kind of tap them on my brush. And we're going to come back down here and re-strengthen some of the reflective illusions back on top. I'm trying to get this wet enough so that when I wipe the brush on a paper towel and lightly tickle right or left, it'll shimmer or move the paints a little bit so it's a little more reflective in its illusion. One thing I forgot, which would help a lot in the water illusion, is taking that dark color and reflecting these main trunks over here on the left. So I'm going to take these and kind of do a reversal of the illusion and wiggle the brush kind of nervously so that it appears as if the water's moving. Bring that one down, this one down a little bit, and of course maybe we'll have some other ones further away. And they probably would not reflect as well. So I'll just, again, while I've got the color on my brush, I'll clean my brush out and suggest these. Now the ones that I brought down here along the shore, I'll use the fan brush and lightly shimmer them. This being just wet enough that if I lightly touch it, it will kind of zigzag a little bit. It'll break that and shimmer that a little nicer. Gives a little more distinction. On the ground, the acrylics do most of my work for me, but I may restate a lot of that with more detail by using the fan brush. And as if leaves are kind of packed up on the ground or sitting on the ground, I've got oranges and ochres. I can begin to just tiptoe little tickles of light leaves and all, and I'm using the edge of the fan brush, angling with the lay of the land, and I'm sprinkling on little glints and glimmers of sunlight playing through the forest. And you can see I'm getting little just speckles of paint, but I'm trying to lay them on the ground, creating little bits of light playing all up along the side of the stream and back into the forest. If you get too much, just wipe your brush, keep a handy paper towel, and then just keep tapping. The more you tap it, the more it softens and leaves a more diffused illusion, which is actually more attractive than having it overstated. So I'm tapping and tapping. So that just puts a little lighter leaves in areas. Let's go in and have some fun with the foliage up top. There's a number of different ways we can do this. Spatter painting is one of my favorites, and I think I'm going to use a bristle fan with thinner in it. This is a small bristle fan, although if I used a larger one, I'd probably not have to reload the brush so often. But we'll use a small one. I'm going to come down to some of my brighter fall colors, maybe my lightest color to begin with. And I mentioned earlier that we're going to need to bring the leaves back over the top of the sky. Up in the high part of the canvas, it looks and appears like the sky is placed on top. So I'll take the fan brush, and using the fatty part of the tissue of my finger, I'm going to pull back on the paint or the bristles of the hair and kind of let the light colors sprinkle off. And so these give me little dots and sparkles of leaves that are kind of in sunlight. Now I keep the lightest ones here, then I'll come down, darken the color as I go down to some rustier colors or oranger colors. You can use just about any colors. And I'm going to sprinkle some of these on. I get kind of wild and fun with this. I like to get these little dots and dibbles. And the more quickly and briskly I pull back and snap the hairs, the larger the dots will appear. And this will make them look like they shimmer and shine back into the distance. Now that was the oranger color. And I think I'm going to just go right up in here and get a few right up over the sky. So that'll be a little more distinctive. Then I'll go get some browns, again thin down with thinner, and make some little dark shadowy leaves, because this could be the underside of a leaf. I'll keep these over in the areas, and you can almost see those beginning to put little droplets of paint. Oh, I'm getting a few on my arm too. Have to be a little careful of how thin you get this, and you can see that's definitely not good on the manicure. But when I'm painting, I really like to get into the paintings, and luckily even my oils will clean up fairly easily. I'm going to use a little bit of this dark up underneath this tree over here. Again, trying to create shadows and plateaus of lights and darks. This is a very free painting. Maybe a little bush or something way back into the distance. A little dark underneath the base of your tree will help kind of plant the tree. Brings a little bit of a shadowed illusion. Sometimes even, well, scratch ends won't work with the acrylic background because you have such a, you're already blocked in solid, so you can't go back down to the light canvas. Let's go play in the water. I think I'll use the same brush. And I really did let that run down my hand. Don't take after the teacher with that step. But just be a little more cautious, and sometimes it's nice to use the handle of a brush to make those spatters. I'm cleaning out the brush. I'm going to go play down into the water area. We'll use a little bit of the white with the blue. Don't use straight white. It'd be a little too stark. And we'll use the little mini fan to start suggesting a little bit more of a glint of light on the movement of the water. I suggested it with the first application of paint, but now I'm going to come back in and just lightly tiptoe using the brush horizontal and put a little sparkle occasionally back in the middle of the stream. That leaves me soft edges behind it so that the light is kind of filtering in the middle area. Too much paint, just blot your brush, and you can have a little mini waterfall in some areas. Just tickle it in. Now there are rocks and things that go in there, so I'm going to use a different brush to do the rocks. We'll use a flat bristle brush, and I'll use strictly some brown, kind of a Van Dyke brown, maybe even a little blue in it. And I'll base in some stones and rocks around the side of the stream, and I'll just kind of tap them on, maybe right here that are breaking the waterfall, maybe one in the middle. And I'm just kind of tiptoeing, getting smaller into the distance, and throwing some little smudges. You don't want to get too terribly much interest in there. Maybe one right in the middle of the stream, and we're reflecting. All I need is some darks to base in the object, and then we'll come back in later and we'll put a little light on the top. So we're just basing in some darks. If you're coming up close to the water, you want to keep a vertical pull occasionally so that you get that shimmery look or reflective look. Well, I think that's working very nicely, although it's still just in its block-in stage. I've suggested rocks and stones back into the forest, and we'll just kind of soften edges. This is more just playing on the canvas almost. We'll wipe the brush, and then we'll take some of that blue-gray, the color in the sky, and we'll put a little bit of brown in it so it's a little grayer. And we'll make this for the light on top of the rocks. We'll just kind of touch and just tickle with the corner of the brush and indicate little movements of gray for lights on the rocks. And it's just like putting a little tiny cap on the top of a head. Just a little tap, 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 little suggestions all down along the stream. I think down here at the base we need to get the feeling of the water as it comes to the bottom part, and that might help. We need a few more shadows around the shoreline to break the stream apart. So we'll throw in a little more darks right in there, and then I'll soften them. Actually, I'm just applying the paint a little over in here. That kind of helps to give me a separation line to where the land and the water might be changing. And then when I want it to be water, I pull down on it a little bit and shimmer it. And if I want it to go up into the land, I just kind of lightly blend up. So you can build on this one. I haven't invested a lot of paint in this one. Even the fan brush works sometimes really nice for a light on a rock. Okay, not bad. So I brought some light down and played lights, and these are again blue-grays on top of the existing browns that were supposed to suggest rocks. And you could spend lots of time on doing that. Let's go back up and let me show you one other technique with a sponge. I'm going to come down to my thinner and wet it, squeeze it out. That gets rid of almost all the excess thinner. Also gives me a chance to clean my hands a little bit. So I'm just going to wash that up with a little thinner. And as I take the damp sponge, I'm going to tap gently into some of the lighter colors. This will give me a more defined foliage look. Let's come up here real close up in the top. And now I can begin to specifically put on leaves in clusters, in tighter little groupings. You don't want, if it's fall, you want to keep them a little bit spread out. You don't want it to look like an apple tree and in full blossom, but I can tiptoe little dabbles, and the sponge will give you all sorts of little interesting effects. There's a little bit of light sprinkle there. We'll come over here, and I'm keeping the lights pretty close to the lighter opening so that I feel like sunlight could be in that area. And this is just tapped on. Then you can go darker with maybe a rusty color like a maple color and come back up and put a little more interest, stronger in there. And this gives you a different texturing and a more defined splotchiness, I guess is the best word to call it, for your foliage. Okay, not too bad. We're getting there. But if you can look at the finished painting, I have one behind me, it's got a lot of looseness. And the looseness is what helps to be achieved by spatter painting and dabbling colors on. You could take a specific tree and take your time and with a liner go in there and put them on leaf by leaf with a little dot, dot, dot. But that's quite time consuming, and I feel the overall flow that the acrylics gave me a foundation took care of a lot of the areas that would take more time to fill in. Usually to get your rocks to sit down, just a little bit of a movement right at the point, and it just sits the rocks right down into the water. Just as if that water has a little bit of a break right there. Well, I hope you got a little bit of idea of fall scenes, and the next time you go for a walk, take yourself some pictures and get some great reference paintings to use. You'll find that my reference pictures, I keep them handy just to get me in the mood and to get me feeling like it's fall. Even though I'm from Florida and I don't see it down here, it's a beautiful time of the year, and you can capture it with your pictures and reference. Hope you enjoyed doing this one with me, and you'll join me again for the next show.